Hey everyone, it's Scott from Heroic Sues Gaming. How's it going? Another video for you. This time I'm going to be talking about a comic book that I read that came out a long, long time ago called 30 Days of Night. Oh, let's get over here so you can see it better. 30 Days of Night. I have it on my Kindle because that's how you can get it these days. It is a comic book by Stephen Niles and Ben Templeton, or Temple Smith. I kept messing that up too, and I'm just going to keep messing it up, so I'm not even going to worry about editing this video. It's Steve Niles and Ben Temple Smith. Came out in 2002. It was originally supposed to be a movie pitch that was supposed to be a thing that was made into a movie. It was pitched. It didn't go. And so Steve Niles is like, I'm just going to make a comic book because he pitched the idea to IDW. And so they were, like, hey, let's make this into a comic book. And they were like, yeah, sure. And they signed Ben Temple Smith to it. And so it was done. It was also made into a movie a few years later in 2008-ish, I think. But it was a thing that happened. The reason why I'm sort of acting a little coy or a little aloof about it is because 30 Days of Night has spawned several spin-offs, quite a bit, and has made 2 or 3 movies or something. And I don't really know why. It is a comic book. It does tell a story. Is it great? No. It's actually kind of slow. Now, there is a cool concept. So, mind you, when it came out in 2002, the concept of, like, a city in Alaska that doesn't really have a sun was kind of cool. That's a great idea, especially because this was at, I think, probably the peak heyday of the goth scene. So, we know that the goth scene sort of started in the late 80s, early 90s, and sort of, got moved in by the grunge scene, so it sort of pushed forward. When the grunge scene started to die off, people moved into this emo stage, and that's when they went into their goth phase. And then those teenagers sort of went into their goth phase and then peaked out around 2002, 2003, started to taper off, and by like 2007, they were kind of gone. Then you had the second group of like emo kids that kind of moved in and sort of held the goth scene out there. And while the goth scene still kind of exists, I think all the people that were in the goth scene in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s have kind of moved on and become like rockabilly hipsters. Like those same goth girls are now like girls you see on Facebook talking about crystals and stuff, right? So like I think that's kind of what happened, but that's not my point. The comic came out in the heyday of the vampire stuff. Like Interview with the Vampire came out in, I think, 99 or something. And like 2002 we had like Lestrade. I know that like Blade definitely one, I don't know about 2, had come out by then, and then also like The Matrix had like changed everyone to like trench coat wearing people that wore like sunglasses at night. So vampire was like a thing that was kind of cool at the time. I think Queen of the Damned had come out by that point. I mean, we just had a lot going on. Underworld 1 came out in 2003. I remember because I was in college. So 2003-4ish, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about. Like that same time frame is when this comic came out, so I can understand why it got popular, but it's actually kind of a boring story. There's not really a whole lot going on. Our protagonist and his people are just kind of hiding from the vampires for most of the story, and then when he finally, like, he's always like, he's negative like the whole story, he doesn't think they're going to survive. And then when he sees the thing, and then all of a sudden just completely flips and is like, yeah, we're going to survive, I've got this plan. And, he enacts his plan and manages to, rescue everyone as protagonists do in these kinds of stories. But it's a weird thing. Like, it's okay to have a dynamic character, and it's actually great to have a dynamic protagonist. If you have a static protagonist, it's a very strange story. And in this case, he is a dynamic protagonist, but only because in the last bit he suddenly changes. Like, it's not... that's the sort of thing that you find in movies for, like, not the protagonist, right? It's like sort of like you got the grizzled detective character, and then his like captain who's constantly up him about all of the stuff that he's doing, is constantly upset about the way that he's breaking the rules, and then at the very end of the movie decides to change heart and be like, yeah, let's break the rules to save the day, right? Like that's the kind of thing that you expect from a support character, not the protagonist of the story, which is it's a bit weird. But we get introduced to some vampires, and they apparently have some kind of hierarchy vampire society, but we don't get to see anything about that. So, like, this story doesn't really have us anything. It's just got some vampires, and apparently there's a hierarchy, and then some people that live in a small town in Alaska that have to deal with no sun for 30 days, and then they all get killed, except for a small handful, which are led by a plucky survivor who really doesn't think they're going to make it, and then eventually decides that they are going to make it, and saves everybody in one night, and then it's the end. And that's the story. And so, like, I want to give it I want to give it thumbs. I do. But Ben Templesmith and I, we don't get along as far as the art style goes. I didn't really like the art style of this book. It was okay, but like the problem I had is like the art style is fine. Like I'm not upset about the art style as it were. What I am upset about is that it was really hard to distinguish characters. And so there's a couple of like main characters. Sometimes they're talking to each other and I can't really tell which is which. Based on the dialogue, and so it's really hard to tell. I'm pretty sure the protagonist was negative the whole time. I could be wrong, and this whole time, like, I was misunderstanding which of the goofy drawings was the protagonist. It's like here, let me show you. Let me just show you some of the art from it real fast, if I can. Let's get to a picture of with people. Hold on. This is all the opening stuff. Okay, come on. Let's get to a page here. Yeah, okay. So this is the art style here. And that's like the close-up stuff, and so it's okay. But then you get to like later scenes where you have just kind of like well, I mean, you can kind of still see stuff going on here, but you just have like things happening like that, right? Like it's like, okay, what is happening here? And like that's not just the glow from the computer. It's legit like that, where it's really hard to kind of see what's happening in some cases. Like the drawing is like dark, and you know, you just have like not so great like things happening. And these are the early stages when you have some definition. Later you get less definition. Like here's some less definition. You know, so focuses on the red. Sure. Okay, so there's my complaint. And that's my complaint, and I bet other people are like, you're dumb. That's fine. But it just, I don't know. There's parts where it's like really hard to understand who's talking at this point. And I can only tell because maybe they have a green on a little bit or something. So that's mine. That's my complaint. So I want to give it a lot of stars, but I don't want to give it any thumbs. I want to give it thumbs, but I don't really have any thumbs to give. So, you know. But I will say that the movie was a little bit better, and I will say this. It did spawn some sequels, and actually the sequels are quite a bit better than the original. And the second one follows the story of the wife of the protagonist from the first one, who was one of the survivors that made it out of Barrow alive in the first one. And she's in charge of a group of mercenaries who are like vampire hunter mercenaries, and she's kind of a badass, and she's learned how to like notice them and stuff. And like the third one's like returning to Barrow with all these skills and things. And yeah, that's a way more interesting story. This is a way more interesting story that happens in the sequels to the original, the first story. But the first story wasn't planned for the sequels. The sequels just kind of happened because of the popularity from the first one. So I don't want to say that it was intentional, because it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. And they even admit so when you like read up on the history of it. So yeah, but so the other ones are great. So you can sort of force your way through the first one, slog through the first one to be able to read like the spin-off stuff and actually be a little bit happier with the second and third ones. The art's still a little janky in some of them, but you know, you can get past that when you have a decent story going on, right? Like that's sort of how I feel about comics. Like the art could be cool and the story could suck. That's not a good comic in my opinion. The art could be sucky and the story could be really cool. Great, then I'll accept that. But then if like you have like a not great story, not great art, I gotta, you know, pull back on the thumbs. So I would say read through 30 Days of Night so that you can read 30 Days of Night, Dark Days, and Return to Barrow, and then like all the other stuff that came off of that, like Red Snow, which is the zombie. The vampires that are Nazis, the Nazi vampires, the World War II story, which they did turn into a movie called Red Snow. But I think it was zombies in that one and not vampires, because they sort of lost the 30 Days of Night feel. I don't know. I haven't actually watched it. I've only seen bits from that movie, but yeah, it's like Nazi vampires in the snow, right? So so that's what it is. Cool. That's it. That's my whole review. I give it no thumbs and wish I could, but I give some thumbs for the sequels. So, you know, go with that. Do with that information as you will. And then we can watch this movie that they made later, which, like I said, did a better job, I think, because we could see what was happening and who was talking. So yeah, that's it. That's my review of 30 Days of Night, and I hope that you guys use this information somehow. I don't know. You could hate it, you could be angry with me, and you could tell me that I'm dumb, and you know, whatever. I don't care. That's just my feelings on the stuff. So I will talk to you later with more reviews, more things later down the road. Check it out. See you later.